What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
No, not an April Fool's joke. Just old Tommy T making a really silly mistake that he had to fix. But don't worry, we're here, right? Not an April Fool's joke. It is April 1st, though. New month. No better way to kick off a new month than with another Dynasty Points. No market report this week. Technical problems. My new mixer's on the way. If my mic does some weird stuff, just know we're trying to tough this thing out for you guys. We'll clean it up in post. Today, exciting day. We have a pretty frequent guest here who's also been growing his own channel at an insanely rapid rate. So if you're new here from Pure Potential with Paul Patterson, welcome in. Hitting the sub button goes a long way. Paul, you've been here a couple of times, making your way back. First time in 2025. Happy we get you before the draft. Usually you're here after the draft. So this is a little bit of a fun switch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to jump on Dynasty Points at a moment's notice. Everybody knows that I'm the reserve. I'm the guy you call in when there's nobody else. You send up the bat signal. Here I am. So happy to be here to chat with you guys today. Pre-NFL draft, post-NFL draft, whenever you want.
Apparently, you need to update your wide receiver rankings. I think your subscribers are coming on over to let you know. And don't worry, Pure Potential subscribers. I'll let them know. I don't let the comment's not going to go flying under the radar. Of course, joining us as always is Lucas Gilbert from his new home. And we, of course, have Ryan Heath. That's at RyanJ_Heath and at L Gilbert FF. No Jacob. He is in London currently, I believe. So shout out to him actually getting vacation. He tried to weasel his way onto the show. We told him, stop. All right. You're you're traveling. Sounding like me out there trying to force yourself on every show, no matter what. Today we have a fun show. We are discussing Ryan Heath's second year wide receiver stuff that he just put out. We're going to talk about naming your draft picks and why it drives me nuts personally. I didn't even ask these guys if they had a real take on this because I just felt so strongly about it after getting asked about it that I just need a soapbox to speak on this week. And hopefully these guys agree with me because there's nothing I love more than a little bit of groupthink on this show when I'm right. We're going to talk about rookies versus vets. Of course, that's the title of the video. Ryan, you and I were looking at draft boards between the rookie picks being drafted in startups compared to how high pushed up the actual rookies are being drafted in startups. We have some of our subscriber startups that have just been cashing in on insane values like 2.9 Puka, etc., just because rookies are getting jacked up. So we're going to talk about today if there is value or not in drafting veterans over some of the rookie picks. We have rookie bargains. We're also going to talk about our favorite bargains in drafts. Steven, you're the first person to ever point it out. Thomas with the baseballism drip. I'm even wearing my Vladdy today. Jay's just pulled out a big win. Big baseball guy here. So shout out to you. You're right. You know what, Steven? Contact me after the show. We have 5 Data Suite subscriptions to give away this episode. Paul, Steven's getting one of them. He's getting one of them. Best comments tonight are getting hooked up with the Data Suites just because Paul is here. So, Steven,
you're welcome.
Holler at me. You got yourself a Data Suite. All right, guys. I think we're good to just dive right in and do what we do. No 5 for 5 today. I know everyone's bummed. Paul, you were specifically bummed. I asked Jacob to write.
I won't lie. I have to say I was very excited to delete 5 for 5 from the show today when I started putting it together. I was like, yes, that's
just wanted to destroy Ryan
right now
at 5 for 5, and
I feel bad because
God,
Paul usually fills in when Jacob's not here, so not having 5 for 5, I always feel bad. But I did ask him, hey, can you write me a 5 for 5? I would have hosted, since I'm in the lead anyway, because that's what I do. And I would have hosted 5 for 5 with Paul playing in my place. Couldn't work it out. Again, the dude's in England. So I did try, Paul. I did try.
That's all right. I forgive you. He could have done all Jaguars related trivia since he's in the home of the Jaguars.
He could have, and I know a little bit. I know a little bit about the Jimmy Smiths, the O'Shaughnessy's. I know a little bit of Mark Brunell. All right, that was my era. But I think, Lucas, stop yawning already. We're gonna go right into the second year wide receivers. I'm gonna kick this off to the man that wrote the article himself, because I think taking advantage of what we know is already good rookie or former rookies going into their sophomore year wide receivers is a little bit of a safer bet than maybe rolling the dice on some rookies with iffy profiles. So Ryan, let's walk it through why second year wide receivers.
Absolutely. So first, I do have to clarify. I think earlier, Tom, you said that the article's out. The article is not out yet, and I can tell you exactly why the article's not out. It's because of all of you guys that are sending all of these customer support messages to us on April 1st. You are completely just backing up everything here at Fantasy Points. We can't get anything published. It's a disaster. So
we love you.
That's why the article is not out yet. Expect it sometime end of this week. You'll be able to read it. I'm calling it the year 2 wide receiver manifesto. It's amazing. You're going to love the article. Really just kind of a theoretical take on year 2 wide receivers. Are they still good values, right? This is kind of, for a long time, we've always said, look, year 2 wide receivers, this is when wide receivers break out. You want to buy into wide receivers in both redraft and dynasty when they're entering year 2. It's when they will generally have their biggest production, their biggest value bumps, right? That was true probably 2 or 3 years ago. You could just kind of blindly draft all of the year 2 wide receivers. You were probably going to come out decently okay, right? That's not the case anymore because all of you guys are too smart. All of you guys just push all of these year 2 wide receivers as far as you possibly can up draft boards, just beyond anything that's reasonable. So now we have to be a lot more careful, a lot more discerning about which types of year 2 wide receiver profiles we buy into, especially in dynasty, right? So kind of your reason for buying a year 2 wide receiver in dynasty as well. I want a value increase, right? I'm hoping to make a value bet. If I'm on a rebuilding team, if I'm trying to maintain the value of a contender over time, yeah, though you want to be trying to get young players onto your roster that are going to increase in value, right? That's kind of the whole game we play. When you compare that to drafting a rookie in a rookie draft, trading for rookie picks, however it is you're acquiring rookies, yeah, theoretically, we have more information about a year 2 wide receiver, right? So it should be a safer bet, all else equal, right? But I don't think that's actually the case anymore, because of what I just said, because of how hungry everybody is for the year 2 wide receiver breakouts. We push a lot of these ADPs, again, on year 2 wide receivers that we don't actually have that much information about, or sometimes that we even have clearly negative information about that we're choosing to ignore, right? I would argue this is the case with Rome Odunze right now. We have a lot of fairly negative information about his production in year 1. Guys that produce like Rome Odunze as rookies generally don't have great NFL careers, right? Or it generally don't have amazing fantasy ceilings. Yet, it's Ben Johnson. It's the Ben Johnson offense, guys. You have to buy in. You have to draft Rome Odunze in the 4th round of startups at like around actually productive wide receivers, right? That's kind of that's kind of what happens, right? Like Rome Odunze could be anything. He could even be a T. Higgins. It is essentially what the point we've gotten to, just referencing like the Family Guy meme, right? Hopefully people know what I'm talking about here. But what I kind of the TLDR of the article, and obviously I give a very specific take on pretty much every relevant year 2 wide receiver, kind of the TLDR for Dynasty is among I think year 2 wide receivers are still great buys in the case of the actually elite guys. In the case of the guys that we kind of know are going to be here and are going to be producing fantasy points, right? I think that top tier especially is still a little bit undervalued. I think we're not as quick, for whatever reason, to just say, okay, let's get on board with Brian Thomas Jr. as a clear top 5 wide receiver in redraft this year. That's where I am. That's where the fantasy points projections are going to be when they come out for 2025, right? Let's get on board with Ladd McConkey as a clear elite asset that you would want over the 102 in a rookie draft, or clearly any wide receiver in this draft class, right? That's, I think, where kind of the value can still be had, is if you can tier up from any of these rookie picks onto those elite names. But other than that, kind of going back to what Jacob discussed last week about not wanting to buy wide receivers on credit, if you're able to trade just a first round rookie pick for a wide receiver, odds are you probably don't want that wide receiver. They're probably in this weird value limbo where they're not producing all that much. I'm talking about Marvin Harrison. I'm talking about Rome Odunze right now. Their value is kind of propped up based on the expectation of, well, it's going to be the year 2 breakout, right? But even if there is like a 2 to 3 fantasy point per game year 2 breakout for either of those guys, that gets you to like 14 fantasy points per game for a Marvin Harrison Jr. Is he maintaining like early round 3 startup value off of that? I'm not totally sure. Is Rome Odunze maintaining round 4 startup value off of an 11 point per game season? I don't think so, right? So this is kind of the problem, is all of the upside is basically just priced in to most of these year 2 wide receivers right now, in my opinion. That's not to say necessarily that anyone in this rookie class is a much better bet, but they at least kind of still have a little bit of an uncertainty discount, or at least the picks do. We'll get into some of the specific players later on this show, and I definitely have some concerns about some of where some of these rookies are being taken in startups right now as well. But I think with picks, you at least get the uncertainty discount still. You're just not with the year 2 wide receivers at this point. In most cases, you're just getting the market saying, yeah, well, it's year 2. They'll figure it out. Jaxson Smith and Jigba figured it out. Like even Quentin Johnson figured it out. So who cares? Like we're just kind of printing money on year 2 wide receivers is what it feels like. So very long tangents. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything. I'll shut up and stop talking now. But yeah, excited for that article to come out.
First of all, Ryan, I think what people really want to know is, what's your take on Malachi Corley? That's the year 2 wide receiver people really want to know about.
I didn't know Andy.
Oh man, I did not give Malachi Corley a blurb. I do have to apologize for that. But I don't know. Maybe you can ask me what my take is on Savion Williams in a year from now, and I'll give you the same answer. I imagine.
Brutal. I did actually have a dynasty related thought. I'm not sure how much the article is focused on dynasty specifically, or if it's about like seasonal projections. But one thing that I think people don't factor in when they're talking about year 2 wide receivers breaking out, if you have a wide receiver that struggled in year 1, I find that they have kind of a tighter range of outcomes as far as value. So like if a rookie wide receiver comes in like a Ladd McConkey and has 1,100 yards as a rookie, you see their value, skyrocket from where it was originally. You take a JSN coming into year 2 after having kind of an underwhelming rookie season, puts up 1,100 yards. He does not rise nearly to the level that you would expect a prospect of his pedigree to rise after that type of a season. If he had 1,100 yards as a rookie, it would have been a 1-2 turn pick in startups. He does it as a sophomore. I think people see that more as his realistic ceiling and not as like, well, this is, a jumping off point and then we're going to keep going from here. So when you're betting on someone like Rome Odunze in the 4th round, you have to realize, like, even if he does the JSN thing that just happened, he's not going to the Amon-Ra, Puka, Brian Thomas range. Like, he's probably going to the Garrett Wilson JSN range. That's like a round and a half of value gain. So I think that's another thing that just makes him specifically like a less intriguing player to invest in.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And that's another like kind of big issue I have with Rome Odunze is JSN was like a round 6 startup pick a year ago, and we've already just pushed up so much of like that value gain out of Rome Odunze's range of outcomes at this point, right? Yeah, at most you're getting like a round if the comparison really has to be JSN. So yeah, fully agree there. And yeah, if you're rebuilding, if you need to take these bigger swings, then yeah, rookies certainly have a wider range of possible value shifts.
Yeah, we even had new Fantasy Points full-time hire Theo Greminger message me yesterday, and he said he's just re-rolling Marvin Harrison Jr. at every opportunity he can. All the data tells you sort of should be. I think the worst thing to happen for year 2 breakout wide receivers was JSN doing what he did. Because a lot of people don't look at the data into how JSN did what he did, except for me. And my DMs were full of JSN folks relentlessly all offseason until the fantasy playoffs towards the end of the year. And then I didn't hear a peep. So shout out to all of you. But it's no different when you look at a rookie wide receiver like Xavier Worthy. Paul, you were here when we said best and worst bets to make. Xavier Worthy was one of the better bets you could make in the 6th. I didn't agree, but look at what happened. He didn't blow it up, right? He didn't light it up for most of the year. End of the year, he starts getting a little bit of that cheeky wide receiver stuff. Then he kind of blows up. Playoffs. He gained a whopping few spots, and you can now draft him at wide receiver 18 instead of 24 or 25. And now are you making that bet on him? What does he have to do to jump into that 3rd round stratosphere? I mean, Rashee Rice, who may not have a knee and, definitely getting suspended, is still getting drafted ahead of him. So what do? You're left in limbo to make these tough decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of, Xavier Worthy's value right now is part of why I thought he was a solid bet is like, he didn't necessarily have to blow up the stat sheet to at least maintain his value, just because people have a lot of optimism about him in that situation. People were high on him as a prospect. He had the 1st round draft capital. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't fully convinced he was going to take off. I had some concerns about his profile, and I think we did see some of that in terms of the limitations to his game. But yeah, the reason Rice is still going ahead of him is just because what we saw from Rice in that limited sample was better than anything we did get from Worthy throughout the year. And that's just massive target consolidation, being kind of that go-to guy for Mahomes. I can't speak to the injury stuff, but if we get Rashee Rice back on the field healthy and unsuspended at any point this season, I'm going to expect him to be that dominant target earner again. So I'm not necessarily looking to chase Worthy up the board. I think this is the spot with a year 2 wide receiver where you got your year to kind of get a sneak peek, and now you can sell him, at a small gain or at least no loss from where you invested in him. If I'm rostering him, that's probably where I'm going, because I don't think he showed me enough in year 1 to make me think he's going to be the guy that takes over that offense or has that like true wide receiver 1 ceiling.
I will just step in here a little bit. Worthy, I know I just gave a take about how I only really want the elite year 2 guys that you would have to tier up from like a rookie first to. Worthy is the guy that's closest for me right now in terms of I don't think he's like actively a sell. I'm okay with him on my rosters. I'm okay clicking him in like the late 5th of startups right now. I don't think it's like horrendous. And the reason for that is I think what you just laid out, Paul, is still the case where all it takes is Rice to be suspended for 4 games and Worthy to stay in that kind of short area design target role for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, have a couple games like above 15 fantasy points, and then we're legitimately talking about him as like a 3rd or 4th round like startup kind of value, right? That I think there's a lot of worlds where you can flip Worthy for even more 3-4 weeks into the season. I would then very much be doing it because it's the same thing, right? People are still going to be incredibly optimistic about he's attached to Patrick Mahomes for his entire career. Like this is awesome. He's in the best situation. So I think he's fine. Whereas I think almost every other year 2 receiver that you have to pay anything significant for it is like actively bad right now, would be my stance.
You know, Ryan, I was getting ready to, like, as you were starting your monologue here, not that it was really a monologue, but just your description of the article, I was getting ready to, fight a little bit harder for some of these second-year wide receiver guys. And then I started to look at this ADP. Yeah. And we talk about hope all the time on here. And I love buying on hope. It makes me feel really good inside at the time until I get to the end of the season and I'm still drafting at the 103. And it's like, well, that didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. But Marvin Harrison Jr. going at wide receiver 10 right now. And truly, what is his highest range of outcomes if we're looking at what he could do this season? I don't think that we're projecting anywhere close to the wide receiver 1 overall type season. And on a, best case scenario, he might be wide receiver 5 if just every single thing goes into play. We're probably looking at, ranging somewhere between like a mid wide receiver 2 up to, a low end wide receiver 1. And that's still, things are going relatively well for him in his second year, in this. And you're probably having to give up multiple ones right now to the owner of Marvin Harrison Jr. if you're actively trying to go out and acquire him. That's really not something that's going to be smart towards putting more points onto your fantasy lineups, especially as you all are talking about with Puka Nacua going 209 right now, wide receiver 7 overall. If there's that kind of trade-off, whether it's the comparison of actual production, but it's just not near as sexy in terms of his resume before he got into the NFL compared to Marvin Harrison Jr., yeah, it should be pretty obvious right now to dynasty managers who you want to go out and acquire. I don't want to get into the Ladd McConkey, Marvin Harrison Jr. debate. I feel like at least my feelings are going to get hurt in it, and I'm not prepared for that right now.
We'll be here all night.
So just looking more at those, underperforming wide receiver 2s. Yeah, definitely agree with you. I'm really excited to see the article whenever it comes out. And hopefully this will save me some heartache later on in the season.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, I would never, for a year 2 wide receiver, I want to be very careful about saying this is a younger player's ceiling, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., yeah, there's a world where he's a top 5 receiver this year. There's a world where Rome Odunze is a top 10 receiver this year. Those are possible worlds. My issue is just opportunity cost, right? I have a much easier time telling myself the story for guys going around Harrison, not trying to shove Ladd McConkey down your throat. I have a much easier time telling myself the story of Ladd McConkey having a top 5 season, of Garrett Wilson even having a top 5 fantasy season. This was the guy, that the elite talent that we were making all the Marvin Harrison Jr. type of arguments for years. And now Garrett Wilson is suddenly cheaper than him. And people clearly prefer Harrison, which is very surprising to me. JSN, I can tell the story of a top 5 season, I think, a little bit easier than I can with Marvin Harrison right now. So yeah, it's all just opportunity costs. If Harrison were around cheaper, I would be totally in on him. But yeah, kind of my biggest structural take is that just most of these year 2 guys that haven't proved it yet are being treated as if they have, or as if they very likely will. And that's not necessarily the case.
Or in the case of Ricky Pearsall, something I say on the show all the time, he has a couple of good games that people remember over all of the faults that tend to carry him farther. I mean, we'll just look at chasing breakers. Pearsall's an older player despite his draft year. That I do not see him being a long-term wide receiver 1. I take him at value, but roll the dice on Odunze over him. This is the kind of conversation chasing that I see often. You never have to make that decision. This will never be a decision that we even have to make. And let alone, it's important to remember, guys, how many wide receiver 1s in a 12-team league are there per year? It's tough math. I know I'm not good at it, but I know it's 12. Mm-hmm. I'm not the rocket scientist. I'm not the data writer. I'm not the teacher, but I know that it's 12 in a 12-team league. So you're really not always looking for a wide receiver 1. You're just looking for someone to give you wide receiver 1 weeks. I think Pearsall can do that. He showed it. He's in the offense to do it. That's why he's a good bet. We don't know what the offense is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be DJ Moore, and we don't know if Cole Kmet's going to be Sam Laporta. You can't copy and paste roles, right, all the time. That's one thing that we do often that I think we should stop doing. A lot of the bets on wide receiver, second-year wide receivers that people, I'm making my case, this is my guy, he's going to break out, are what caused kind of insane. Look at Josh Downs last year. Josh Downs is a can't miss, gonna break out, high-end wide receiver 2, gonna be a low-end wide receiver 1. And what wasn't factored in is that he has a stormtrooper trying to hit him with a ball. And you can't, like, he's awful. Anthony Richardson might be logistically one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen play football. And now if you made that bet, he's going to do it. He's a locked in. I'm going to get him in the 6th round. I think he could be, if you paid that price and it doesn't work out. Right. So my biggest thing is, if you don't have to reach to secure your 2nd round breakout when there are warning signs, don't let the value come to you. It's easier to do as a portfolio player. Like if you're in 1 to 2 leagues, it's harder to do. But as a portfolio player, you got to be a little bit more aware of situations around the wide receivers in the second year. I don't think there's any problem. The only problem with Ricky Pearsall's price is that he goes before Chris Godwin, and that can't happen. That to me is the most blasphemous part of that. So
yeah. I just want to quickly say that the thing with Josh Downs, the thesis worked. Like, he did break out. He averaged 3.9 more fantasy points per game in year 2 than he did in year 1. That's awesome. He's a success story for the year 2 breakout. Did it matter for you in Dynasty? No, not really. Not yet, at least. Like, I still hold hope for Josh Downs. I don't know. I don't want to like unleash the Daniel Jones in fantasy take without Jacob on the show, but like, maybe something could happen in Indianapolis that's going to save our Josh Downs bags. But yeah, that's just the point, right? Is there's only a handful of players that really matter in fantasy every single year. Yes, year 2 wide receivers have a good chance at doing that, but it's not going to be everyone. Just because we know the breakout rates are good in year 2 doesn't mean you should be paying a ton more for every single year 2 player, because they don't, the odds that any single one of them is going to be the difference maker is low.
I feel like I need to speak on Josh Downs because I've definitely made him like a considerable part of my brand. I will say, first of all, nobody was paying up for Josh Downs last year. Okay. That dude was like outside the top 100 on Underdog. He was like a 9th round startup pick. Like, I know, because I was drafting him in every draft. So he wasn't expensive. But it's going to happen. One day he's going to have a real quarterback, and one day it's going to happen, because that dude is freaking awesome when he plays. He also just needs a coach that realizes he can play outside and he's not a slot only player. But I think he had like a top 5 yards per out run in the NFL, targets per out run, in the NFL last year. So I'm going to take that to the bank, and I'm going to keep holding on to the Josh Downs shares, because he's, unlike some of these other year 2 wide receivers, he is not expensive. I just drafted him after the 204, I think, was off the board in my last startup. So I'll take a 23-year-old wide receiver who's shown what he's shown for that price.
Ryan, just real quick before we're moving on to something else. Like, it seems like because fantasy managers have gotten so smart with the second-year wide receivers, how can we, start to change our processes to where we're taking advantage of people potentially overvaluing these second-year wide receivers because of their breakout? Like, what's the thing that we need to be, taking advantage of? Similar to like whenever everybody was saying late round QB only, and it got to the point that was so ridiculous that, people start to adjust to it. Like, what's the next strategy moving forward to where we're not getting sucked in by these sort of like fake values, I'll say?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to find alternative ways to gain value on your dynasty teams, right? We'll get into rookies today. Rookies are one possible avenue to do that, right? Also, to Paul's point, there's are going to be a lot of like year 2 wide receivers that quote unquote broke out that didn't make that huge fantasy impact, like a Josh Downs, that are still available even after they have broken out and shown us that they're good players, right? They are still available at these lower prices that at least median wise, they're going to provide similar production to whatever, like a Rome Odunze or a Marvin Harrison or a Xavier Worthy. But their upside is maybe somewhere else that's not just as easily provable on like a bar chart that Fantasy Points tweets out, right? The upside there is, oh, well, maybe the Colts will finally get tired of AR and there will be real quarterback play in it, right? There are different ways that you can kind of imagine or envision upside for different players. I don't know. Maybe this is a long rambling answer that's not like any one thing, but I think that's kind of the truth of the matter is you just have to recognize when like a market inefficiency is no longer just like a cheat code that you can keep pressing the button on. And that's kind of how I'm looking at year 2 wide receivers this year. All right. Tom, did we want to move on to naming our draft picks? I know you had a lot of really strong opinions on this topic. I wouldn't want to move it on and just leave you out here.
Yeah, I was just saying, just having a look to see what was happening with Josh Downs this time last year, and boy, is it all over the place. We've got a 25-1 for Flacco and Downs, which is bloody obscured. We've got Josh Downs for 1-2, Josh Downs for a couple 2s. We've got him for a couple 3s. A weird throw in, and some of these aren't real. You got to remember when you're looking at consolidation sites, you have to understand that a lot of these trades aren't actual, like they're not real people. Like a lot of these trades are so horrendously bad they probably got vetoed. But interesting how up and down it is. I just know Josh Downs is a Scott Barrett top 12 wide receiver rest of season when Flacco went in, and boy did that price go up.
Yeah. He was right at first, and then Flacco kind of fell apart, and then Richardson came back, which I did not expect. I thought they were going to be done with him for the year. It definitely kind of boomeranged a little bit where his value spiked for like 3 weeks. It was like all systems go for Josh Downs. And then it was like, oh, Richardson's back, and they're not throwing the ball, and Jonathan Taylor's running for 200 yards a game. And all of a sudden people kind of didn't care anymore. It's
more. My whole point on that is that it's more situational than people think for you to hit the desired results that you want, and not to deliberately reach, because making a position to position player bet because you think you #no ball is just not something that I want to do when values put into play. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. Let's take our first break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about naming your draft picks. I'm excited. We also have to get caught up on some comments because, boy, are there some good ones. Sit tight. All right, before we get into this, I want to talk about some of the comments that we have in here. I awarded Yellow Dog the second Fantasy Points data suite with this. It says Ward is going to save all my Burks shares. So shout out to you. He absolutely deserves it with that.
Absolute legend in the Pure Potential Discord.
Love it. Brave of you to admit that you even remember Burks' name. Most fantasy players choose to ignore it. He also said it's a sign that I need to order a hoodie. Says it'll justify the expense. And one other said, the Wookiee monster. Hopefully you enjoyed the Stormtrooper reference. Speaking of merch, I need that Fantasy Points hat, which you can get at fantasypoints.com in the merch section. I do see trade questions. We can hit those. But we kind of save all those to the end because we are live, right? It's a different kind of show. Maybe you're not used to it, but it's all theory on this here program. At least 90% of the time, we're theory. We can answer some of these trades, but you got to stick around to the end. If you can't stick around to the end for whatever reason, leave a comment after the episode. I am on here constantly answering all these questions, and if need be, I do send them to everyone else if you ask them specifically to someone else, and I harass them until they give me their answer. Ask Ryan. It is relentless. All that being said, let's talk about naming your draft picks, because this was my soapbox and I see it often. And the question is, should you name picks? Now, as Paul put it, as we were talking before the show, I do not mean name of musicians, your favorite historical figures, your favorite war generals, if you're a real old dude. Not that.
Star Wars characters.
Yeah. Your favorite Pokemon, if you would. I'm talking about you're sitting at the 102 and you're already telling yourself, I'm drafting Hampton. There's no world where I'm not drafting Hampton. This is my Hampton. And when someone comes up to you and says, would you move your 102? And you're going, no, I need a running back and I'm drafting Hampton. On April 1st, you don't need anything. Your roster doesn't need anything on April 1st. We talk about this constantly on the Dynasty Points market report. Do you have a game tomorrow that you need to set a lineup? No. Chances are, if you're the 102, you need as much help as you can get. Ergo, you should be open to everything. But limiting yourself into a train of thought early is going to limit yourself to make trades. It's going to limit your ability to gain value. And that doesn't just account if you're early on in the draft order. If you're at 110 being like, Jaxson Dart's going to fall, I need a quarterback, and Jaxson Dart is going to fall to me. Buddy, if Jaxson Dart goes at 107 because somebody else needs a quarterback, what now? Now you've missed 4, 5, 6 weeks of making trades that could have benefited your roster already. And if you're a natural 110 and you needed the extra push, you could have secured that already. But you're putting yourself in a draft box, and you should not. You should not. The only time it should be reasonable to name a pick is when you get a player that is so far and away the number one pick. Ashton Genty, it was Bijan Robinson. Hell, I saw natural 101 complete tear down to the core. Like the 25 picks type players. They drafted 11 straight rookie picks in the startup. A strategy I can't stand. It is the worst strategy in fantasy next to quarterback hoarding. They're still drafting Bijan at 1 with that pick for some reason, right? There's a few times it can happen. But for the most part, especially with a class like this, because you've got people I trust very much, like Mike or Dynasty Zoltan, who's and Matt Miller and some other people that think this Omarion Hampton 102 is more of a group think. We've got people that are Tet no matter what, just simply because they're wide receiver boys and they couldn't dare pass on a wide receiver, even if he is falling down draft boards and if he doesn't have a perfect profile and he's kind of the wide receiver one by default. You've got I'm taking Travis Hunter at 5, even if he's announced as a DB. We open yourself up to more possibility and stop naming. You're not naming your kids. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, look, this game, I mean, everything that human beings do is going to be affected by their emotional state and what they want, their desires, what's fun. And fantasy football should be fun, dynasty should be fun. But when you want to win consistently, when you want to, grind the edges, you should do your best to separate your emotional desires from what is actually smart. And when you start naming your picks, there's a reason, there's an expression. Someone said it in the chat, don't name your chickens before they hatch or whatever. Don't count your chickens. That's what it is. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. When you start naming your draft picks, you start getting attached to those names. And then you don't want to trade the picks, like you said, or you don't want to deviate when that player doesn't get, a landing spot that's conducive to success, or they fall in the draft. And so you just want to be flexible, like you said, especially now, because draft capital, which we're going to find out in about 4 weeks, has a massive impact on the range of outcomes for these prospects. So you can say all you want that Quinshon Judkins is your running back too. I'm planting my flag. He's the best. If he goes in round 3 of the NFL draft, it's probably not going to be very smart for him to be your, RB2 in the class. So you need to be willing to change your mind. think about a month ago, 2 months ago, a lot of people named their 102 picks Ted McMillian. And since then, the draft landscape has shifted a bunch. He's no longer a lock to go top 10. Cam Ward is now more and more likely to go first overall. Omarion Hampton's getting that round 1 buzz. Travis Hunter's getting more buzz that he might play wide receiver. It might be time to rethink whether that 102 pick is definitely Ted McMillian, because it could be a bunch of other guys. And at the end of the day, like, there's just nothing to gain from doing it. So you might as well not do it.
It's especially if you get into looking at Dynasty Data Lab. It's obviously our favorite. We talk about it all the time. If you were to compare and we're going to do this later, but the rookie pick value to where the rookies are, and you're sitting with the 10, the 103, and you're like, no, this is player X, and that player is actually going in, say, the 5th round where rookies are actually going, you're doing yourself a disservice in the values. So again, it just comes down to keeping your mind open. I just want to point out that Double D gets 1. He's getting Double D is a data suite guy now. If you keep chickens, do you name them? Question, don't break your heart. I love that. Shout out to Jake D Snake, another frequenter of the Pure Potential. People naming their picks on the Discord when we don't know landing spot and draft capital is a fool's errand. I agree. And then Chasing Breaker said, to be fair, this is the closest some in the Dynasty community will ever get to naming a kid. So you have also proved yourself a data suite, because you are certainly not wrong. And Debro being an absolute savage says, I don't count the chickens, but I do name them. That's like naming a cow Bessie and making steaks, bro. That is tough. That is tough doing. Anyone else with anything to add? I feel like we hit the soapbox of naming your picks pretty much as well as we can. Anyone else?
I think just quickly, like, the only thing I want to add is, and I'm just going to use the Omarion Hampton at 102 example, because I am a person where if Omarion Hampton goes in round 1 to, like, the Broncos at 20 overall, then yeah, I think Omarion Hampton's the 102. If that happens, then yes, I'm naming my 102 Omarion Hampton, right? But the reason I'm not doing that right now is because I don't know that that's going to happen. That's the expectation in the NFL mock draft industrial complex, that's what's going to happen with Omarion Hampton. But kind of to the discourse that was happening on Twitter earlier today, yeah, I don't have that actually strong of a take on, is Omarion Hampton that good? Is he clearly the second best running back in this class? No. And I don't think you should have those takes early in April. I think they are only going to lead to you, even if it's not naming picks, it's being too confident about a certain outcome for a pick, right? If I'm holding the 102 and I'm getting an offer for it, I don't want to be thinking, yeah, this is obviously Omarion Hampton on the Broncos at 20 overall. I need to be thinking, well, maybe there's a 50% chance it's Omarion Hampton to the Broncos at 20 overall. There could be like a 30% chance it's Cam Ward at 1 overall, or maybe it's Ted McMillian at like 12 overall, right? Like those are all possible outcomes, not just for you specifically making the pick, but for who is going to value the pick the highest and who they want to take, right? Because that's what's ultimately important, is when that pick's on the clock, who values a player that's available for that pick the highest and who will pay you the most for that, right? That's what a pick actually is. It's not a player. It's just the highest potential deal that you can get for the pick versus your player that you would take, right? And if the highest deal that you think you're going to get up until the picks on the clock is in front of you right now, then yeah, you should take it. It's not a direct comparison of who is your 102. It should be a comparison to, what do I think I can get for this pick at any point between now and when I would actually have to make it.
And all of this points back to the absurdity that rookies go higher in startup drafts than rookie picks at the same spots, which makes absolutely zero logical sense. People are just eager to take McMillian or Hampton higher in a startup draft than they would just take the 102, where they actually can get whoever the best available option is, or they can trade the pick, or they can pivot if that rookie doesn't get a good landing spot. It makes absolutely no sense. Every startup draft I've done this offseason, I feel like rookie picks have fallen further than they should because of the flexibility that they offer. And then I see the startup draft boards with rookies included, and I'm like, what are people doing? Like, how can you be that confident that Dylan Sampson is going to be the guy, that you need? It's bizarre. It's a really weird thing, but I think it comes back to the emotional aspect. People get attached to player names, probably players they watched play college football. They're not attached to, kicker Justin Tucker. No, Justin Tucker is the worst one to mention, I guess. It was the first one that came to mind. Jake Elliott, Eagles legend, perfect in the Super Bowl. People aren't getting attached to Jake Elliott when they draft him, and he represents, the 105. So
I think Debro makes a phenomenal point, and just an example as to why you shouldn't do this, that if Marion Hampton goes to a tougher landing spot late in round 1 versus Kaleb Johnson going to Dallas in round 2, then does that flip? That's why we can get it twisted and why we shouldn't do it, because that is going to change things for people. And if it doesn't, that's take lock, and you need to take your ass back to campus to Canton leagues. All right. Because that's where take lock belongs. Lucas, I'm looking at you.
Why am I catching strays on this? Holy cow.
Because you're a Devi player. All right. And you know why.
I'm a college football fan who prefers fantasy in the NFL. All right. Let's get that straight for
yet
one
to be
thing.
Seen forever rebuilder.
I've won one, so I'll take it. One that I've been in a league with.
Are you hanging that banner behind you?
Absolutely going to.
You need to.
Absolutely.
Banner, and the rest is just going to be like the Colts and their AFC Championship banner. Like that's what's going to be the other one.
It's going to be playoff appearance banners. That's what I'm going to have back here. All right. I get to mark it if in one of my 10 leagues I made the playoffs, then boom, that's going up there as one of the years that I made it. We don't need to put the X in terms of number of leagues that I did it, but hey, I got to it.
2022 playoff appearance.
There we go.
Record.
You know what? It's an accomplishment whenever 5 other people are tanking. I had to beat out one other person to make the playoffs. I'm going to take pride in that, dadgummit.
For Lucas, he's going to hang every banner. He gets the 101 like that. He's going to do it the other way around.
Oh, that's such a good idea. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Oh, that's amazing. Just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, but mainly in terms of like how you can start to like look at this right. I don't think that there's any sort of issue with starting to look at who's going to be available at your draft pick. It's really nice to kind of think of a best case scenario. Like I think for a lot of people at the 102 right now, the best case scenario that they have built up in their head is Omarion Hampton going to, the best landing spot possible. A lot of people say Broncos at 20, but we'll see what happens there. But him going in the first round is going to get a lot of people really excited. It's going to build up the value of that 102. It's going to build up his value as a player. So it's going to be really easy to start to assign that there. But, you still need to be thinking of who else is going to be potentially available at 102 or who, could potentially make sense for other people there. And it's fine to, assign the need, like especially like if running back's something that you need, and that's what's drive you even closer to an Omarion Hampton. Or if you need a quarterback, so it's like, oh, Cam Ward, that's going to be a locked in 102, super easy. Start to think about how you can still, fill that need, but potentially with somebody else at that position, either at the 102 specifically, or at your draft pick specifically, or, making a trade to where if you're really dead set on a player, you can still be in a range to where it's possible that they'll still be there, but you still have other options to pivot to something else. Because I think a lot of times, like the most dangerous thing we can do where if you're committing to a person at a draft pick is trying to make an all or nothing move to ensure that you're getting that player, especially if you're at the 104 and you see running back as your biggest need. There's going to be some people who are doing absolutely silly things to move up to 102 because they had to get one of the top 2 running backs in the class. Whenever the tier after, RB1, the tier from RB2 goes down to like, I don't know, I'm going to say RB5 without thinking about it too much, but there's a very wide range RB2 tier for this class. So that's why I think's more dangerous is, putting a name on a player and then doing something crazy to ensure you get that person.
That's a great angle that we didn't approach that from. So I love that. Not something that I actually even thought of when doing this. That's equally dangerous to do. Yeah, Derek Brown, every player. I've watched this kid for the last 6 years. I know. And it's like Dylan.
And that guy still has Justin Ross on his taxi squad.
Yeah.
Hey, now.
Dylan
where we come into now, year 3, I'll take it.
I might have cut Justin Ross from a couple Dynasty teams this week. I'm not going to lie, guys.
Hey, I'm proud of you.
Ryan, we were talking beforehand about the Scott Barrett comparisons. Get away from his shitty wide receivers. All right. Justin Ross never should have been drafted. I'm just going to do a cut up of every time since I've worked here that he's mentioned Justin Ross in tweets and or videos and just set it as a permanent reminder. And D-Bro says, don't tell Scott Barrett that. Scott Barrett, who, by the way, will be on this show on April 15th, leading up to the draft to talk wide receivers. Not going to want to miss that. The GOAT.
He's going to reveal this year's Justin Ross.
It's Justin Ross. I'm telling you now, this year's Justin Ross will be Justin Ross. He will be here for Boot and Rally 4. Not going to want to miss that one. With that being said, I say we take our second break. We're at 51 minutes. Let's get in to the meat and potatoes, the rookies versus vets. I think Paul's going to disagree with us here a little bit more than the three of us. I'm not sure, but I've been checking out the Pure Potential content, and I got to tell you, the vibes are telling a story. So sit tight. You are not going to want to miss this. Okay, gentlemen, this is how this is going to work. Ryan, when you and I were making sure that we could even do this show tonight because it was in serious jeopardy with the audio situation that we're toughing through, shout out to all of you guys. We kind of started looking at rookie ADP versus rookie pick ADP, and we found some discrepancies that you and I aren't a fan of. So I'll send it off to you first. Let's discuss. And actually, before I do that, correction. I will correct myself as the host of the show. Paul, you tweeted out today not to let people talk you into or tell you about rookie fever and trading your precious draft picks, your golden gun, as we refer to it. You get to shoot that bullet one time. So you're absolutely right in that. For players with no upside, this is where I think it differs, because there are players with extensive upside and great track records that are kind of getting passed up for some of these rookie picks. Mm-hmm. I'll actually pass it to you. Walk us through your tweet. Walk us through what constitutes to you as a player with no upside. Kind of talk us through that thought process, because it's actually kind of interesting that you posted it the same day and before I came to you for today's show.
That's true. Yeah, it was an incredible coincidence. I was actually talking about a video that I put out last week, and I was sort of, I don't know, I guess I'm like sort of changing my mind on some of the player takes that I was giving, because I was talking about like trading away first round picks for players and kind of trying to, give a target for what would be a player. And I sort of started to rethink and kind of talk myself out of some of the wide receiver names that I had brought up, guys like George Pickens and Jalen Waddle and Zay Flowers that I had kind of brought up as, targets for late first round picks. And I'm starting to look at these prospects and thinking about, the class, what players are actually going to get pushed down into the late first as far as prospects are concerned. When you look at Superflex, you look at tight end premium, you think about Jackson Dart picking up first round buzz. And then you have Travis Hunter. Maybe he does play wide receiver, pushes another name down the board, running backs that could go early round 2. I started kind of thinking like, it's just, I'm not sure it's worthwhile trading for these players, trading for players that, are good, but are unlikely to either gain massive amounts of value by meeting their expectations this year or provide like difference making type of production. So I think the perfect example of this would be the typical kind of nesting doll wide receivers that have been talked about on the show. Guys like, I think you would say Zay Flowers, guys like Jordan Addison, where yeah, they could come in this year and score 14 points per game. But is that going to be the reason you win or lose a championship? Because if they put up 14 points per game, they're not going to gain any dynasty value. You're not going to flip them for a profit. You're not getting anything exciting out of that. On the other hand, you flip that for a first round pick, or you keep your late first and don't trade that away for that wide receiver. And you draft a Ladd McConkey, you draft a Brian Thomas, you draft a Bo Nix. Okay, well now you're off to the races because you have just gained a first, more than a first worth of value off of that pick. And what if they bust, right? What if you take Luther Burden this year at the 111 and he's the next Laviska Shenault? Okay, you missed out on a 14 points per game wide receiver. That's not going to tank your dynasty team. So I think most of the time there is a disproportionate risk reward that you get with these picks. It's not the case every single time. And especially as we get closer to the rookie draft, when you're on the clock, people will make kind of ridiculous offers. But for the most part, I think most of the time, I'm just not really looking to trade my picks anytime between now and the rookie draft, unless I am getting a considerable overpay according to whatever dynasty trade calculator you subscribe to. Like, it's just, there's not a lot to be gained from that, I think.
I think it's a phenomenal point. There are definitely players you should not do this for. And when it gets to the nitty-gritty down below, it completely becomes team build. Because when you get to like the 9th or 10th round, you know what your team build is. You know where you can take some shots. That's going to be a part of this discussion today. And it's important to keep that in mind. And if you're new to listening to this program, I will remind you, the only situation we're referring to when talking about players and values is 12 teams start 10.5 tight end premium superflex, because we're not sociopaths that are out there playing in 0.75 tight end premium start 2 tight end. Ferris. So
I am playing in some of those leagues, to be clear. But you're also generally am not talking about their values.
Specifically, Ferris, not that. So important to keep that in mind. All right, Ryan, let's get to some of the ones that we looked at. We'll ask around the horn. Chat, feel free, get involved. Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong.
Yeah, let's do it. So I will say I'm going to read all of these off. This is how I'll do it. I will just neutrally read off an ADP and tell you one or two players that they are going either above or just below or whatever it is. I will just give it to the room, let everyone discuss, and then maybe I'll come back and give my opinion, because I don't disagree with all of these. So the first one is Tet McMillian right now in startups is the wide receiver 15, going above both Rashee Rice and T. Higgins. So I don't know. Let's give it to Lucas first. Lucas, what are your reactions to Tet McMillian over Rashee Rice and or T. Higgins?
That's just such a tough one, especially because like it always surprises me to see where T. Higgins is going. I do have to say I like Tet above both of them right now. I just think that the potential for what his ceiling can be is higher than T. Higgins in his role. I mean, Higgins is great. There's a reason why he's going as high as he's going. And then just all the risk associated with Rashee Rice. I think that Tet McMillian honestly has less risk right now and still has a very high ceiling. Sure, we've seen Rice actually perform at that, but there's just so many other things that you have to consider. So I'm fine with Tet going there. But I think that he is really at the top end of where he should be as just a player.
All right. Paul?
Yeah, I agree with the Higgins take. I think I would be Tet over Higgins. You know, Higgins had kind of outside of the games he missed due to injury, kind of the ideal setup last year for his production. You look at the efficiency of the Bengals passing game, the sheer volume of pass attempts. I think they were second in attempts. Burrow throws over 40 touchdowns. Yeah, he had an incredible overall points per game season, and it was helped by kind of a down year for a lot of other wide receivers. But there's really no room for Higgins to grow in value from where he is right now. He's 26. He is now not going to be the wide receiver one of his offense at any time during his prime. That is he topped out at what he could really be last year. With Tet, it's really easy to see how he rises from this price. Is there more risk than with T. Higgins? Absolutely there is. I wouldn't necessarily fault someone for going with, the quote safe option there, because Higgins does have a high scoring ceiling. But as far as how, my order of priorities, how I value things, I would just, all things being equal in a vacuum, I would rather have the range of outcomes here with Tet McMillian. Rice is a little tougher for me. I have Rice almost back to back with the rookie 103 pick. I have the 103 ahead of Rice. Not necessarily where I have Tet penciled in all scenarios, but certainly in some, I could see him going there. I think the difference with Rice and Higgins is it's a lot easier for me to see how Rice is going much higher than where he is right now. Like, I can picture it in my mind that he comes back healthy. If he just does exactly what he was doing last year, he will rise in value from there. So I think that's more of a coin flip for me. Like, you have upside on both sides, you have risk on both sides. What is your preference? I couldn't really fault anyone going either way. I think right now, if you forced me to choose, I would take Rice.
All right, Tom, I'm going to give it to you before I give any of my spiel.
Yeah, I'll take Rice and T over Tet right now, because that's the key, is that it's right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even saying that over 102, because we're talking about rookies being drafted on the board right now. But I will gladly take a guy whose defense, he's on a team whose defense is one of the worst, whose quarterback is one of the best. He gets consistently good matchups. And yes, he's going to be hurt. But I look at it this way. In football and in the NFL, there's no such thing as an injury-prone player. They're just NFL players who will inevitably at some point get hurt. So we're not projecting for that. But if you're telling me that by the fourth round, I could have my third wide receiver in a start 10 be a 15 to 18 points per game player today at 26 in the perfect environment, the chance, realistically speaking, yes, Tet can be a phenomenal wide receiver one on another team. He also could not be, even as the wide receiver one on another team. And that's how I feel about Rice as well. Rice has already, 20 points per game this year when healthy in the couple of games that we got. Patrick Mahomes' fat ass rolling over on Rashee Rice's knee cost me so much money. I think there, and in his breakout, he had over 17 points per game when he started getting legitimate reps. It is so hard for a rookie to do that. It was not a cakewalk for guys like Neighbors who needed how many targets to do it. Hitting that kind of points per game. Ladd didn't do it. And look at how we're talking about Ladd, and Tet is nowhere near as polished a prospect as some of the other wide receivers that we've seen in rookie years past. I think that there is as good a chance that someone like Tet is a 13 to 15 points per game guy, a la DJ Moore, in his rookie year as there is to him. Well, DJ Moore didn't do it his rookie year, didn't his sophomore year. But he could completely go either way, because situation does matter for these guys, whether we like to admit it or not. So you're telling me that I've got Rashee Rice in the perfect role scenario and quarterback, and T. Higgins in the perfect role scenario quarterback? I have this, but this could be this. This is your Family Guy meme to me. I'm not.
Oh, they got mad in the chat when I used a Family Guy meme earlier. You can't use it again.
They didn't get mad. They quoted it.
One guy got mad.
No. I definitely got some shade in the chat for that.
Really?
Earlier.
Whoever that was, show yourself. But it works. It's a what do you win when you win scenario. What do you need Tet to do to hit that peak at 102 over some of these other guys, or 103 over some of these guys? You need a lot. Remember, AJ Brown didn't hit 18 points per game for a while, and AJ Brown is a god amongst men. That was always his thing. Well, he never hit 18 points per game yet. That was his thing, because guess what? He got hurt, or he needed efficiency, or he needed this, or it matters a lot. So we're even struggling with this with Drake London right now, and he's a second-round pick. So it's very hard for wide receivers to hit these metrics when you already have these guys that are doing it that aren't aged out and they're in the situation and nothing is changing. I gotta go with it.
Yeah.
In April. Anyway, I'll save myself from fantasy receipts in April. I'll go with it.
Yes. So I'll just quickly give my take. I am on the side of I'm going to prefer Rice or Higgins. Rice, it's for a similar reason that Paul gave, where Rice has very similar value upside to a Tet McMillian, just in terms of, if he goes out and produces like we've seen him do, he's hitting like the 2-3 turn of startups, no problem, right? McMillian, yeah, absolutely. If he's as good of a prospect as I think he is, I think Tet's a very, very good prospect. So I like Tet as a player. I absolutely think he has that upside to be a round 2 startup pick, right? For T, I don't care so much about like the wide receiver one on his team stuff. That I don't know. That's like the stuff that's the logic that'll make you trade away Brian Thomas Jr. in week 4 last year, right? Like I don't really care about wide receiver one on his team. I care more about what can I expect in terms of fantasy points per game output, right? And with T Higgins, that it's pretty much in like the 75th to 80th percentile of Tet McMillan's range of outcomes is like he scores like T Higgins does when he's on the field on the Bengals. He is locked into a long-term contract now. It's amazing, right? He's in the best like just overall passing environment in the NFL. I love it. I'm just going to take T Higgins to the bank because I think that is a piece that on a lot of teams can put you over the top in terms of now I'm a contender or now I'm going to win a championship, right? I think Higgins does like barely kind of clear that bar for me. But really my bigger bone to pick with Tet McMillian going over those guys and where Tet McMillian is going in startups right now is right now Tet McMillian is the last pick in the 3rd round of startups by ADP per Dynasty Data Lab. The 103 in startups is at the end of round 4 going back to back with Rome Odunze. So I just wrote a big year 2 wide receiver article, and spoiler alert, one of my biggest one of my biggest takeaways was, if you have Rome Odunze, please flip him for the 103 because there's a great chance that's Tet McMillian. I would love to re-roll Rome Odunze for a better prospect that hasn't shown us that he wasn't good as a rookie in the NFL. Like that is my absolute dream scenario. But that really illustrates what we're talking about here, the difference for whatever irrational reason in startup values between the rookie picks, which again are more insulated technically than a single player that you're trading for. If Tet McMillian falls to late round 1, guess what? Your 102 or your 103 he's not as insulated as your 102 or 103. You can't select a different player if you're in a league where you're physically trading for Tet McMillian right now. That's I guess all my thoughts on there, and we can move on to the next one unless someone takes issue with anything I said.
I'm gonna just quickly look through the comments. Simon saying, Brock Bowers can be anything, even Sam Laporta. We're not talking about a Brock Bowers level prospect here, I think is where the communication gets lost on that bit.
No, I will say that I will own that too. Any rookie is going to have a wider value range of outcomes than a veteran. That's just something that you have to accept if you're making that trade of rookie pick for veteran or what have you, right? And it's something that Paul very intelligently just talked about. You have to know on your roster if you need to take that big value swing versus I need to lock in production. And that answer is going to be different on different teams. So yeah, I will totally own that logic could lead you to, oh, I'm going to trade my 105 or my 106 last year for Sam Laporta, right? That I completely understand that is that could be the conversation we're having looking back on this. Play the clip on fantasy receipts a year from now when Tet McMillian just completely melts faces in year one. Like, I totally acknowledge that.
So it's also important to note that when you look at that in a trade perspective, remember last year people wanted year 2 breakout Zay Flowers, and getting Zay Flowers, trading the 110 for Zay Flowers was a smash decision. Congratulations, you got yourself Brian Thomas Jr. And yes, maybe Zay Flowers was super productive for you, and that worked out for you, but that also worked out for the person getting the pick. Anytime you move a pick like that, you have to be comfortable knowing that you can win or you can lose.
I have a personal and painful anecdote for that. Last year in a rookie draft, I had the 204 pick in this league, and Brian Thomas fell to the 204, which was kind of insane. But anyway, I was ready to snap him up. Somebody reached out about wanting the pick. I ended up trading that pick, and then I think like a third and a fourth for Jalen Waddle. And then he drafted Brian Thomas, and the 3rd round pick, he drafted Bucky Irving. So I traded Brian Thomas and Bucky Irving for Jalen Waddle. And I don't think that it was a bad process trade, because Jalen Waddle was a mid-second round redraft pick last year. He had all the signs that he was ready to break out. There was tons of upside there. Now people don't want anything to do with him. But I can't say that if I could go back in time, that I think that was a bad decision. That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Paul, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I've told our subscribers a couple times so they don't feel so bad. But in the Jonathan Taylor draft, I traded back from the pick that was Jonathan Taylor because I was getting 2 firsts to do it, and drafted Jalen Reagor and Keyshawn Vaughn. So just remember that it's dicey no matter what. And anyone that tells you they get it right 1,000% of the time, liar. You're lying. I don't care what your model says. Revisionist history is not what we want to live in terms of fantasy football, because it bites you. All right, I'm sitting here as a professional full-time fantasy guy, and I can tell you every single time I've screwed up. All right, because I'm honest about it, and we
don't have enough time in the day, Tom.
We don't, absolutely not. You should see some of my rosters, awful. But if you can't look in the mirror at yourself and point out where the mistakes went, doing this entire process is not even going to work for you to begin with. So if you're not open and honest about these possibilities, this may not be the segment for you. Ryan, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's do it. And maybe this one will be quicker because we've touched on him a little bit. So right now in startups, Omarion Hampton is going as the RB8, just above Jonathan Taylor. So I'll give it to you first again, Lucas. Give me your instant reaction to Omarion Hampton versus Jonathan Taylor.
Dang, that's gross. I don't really consider Omarion Hampton as like a clear-cut RB2. I think I said that earlier on, which makes it really tough. But from a value standpoint, I feel like I have to take Omarion Hampton here. I feel like as long as he doesn't have just an absolutely dreadful rookie season, if we are looking at him as somebody who should be getting round 1 value or even early round 2 value at that, then I think he's going to be very safe in terms of maintaining where he's going to be. Plus, Jonathan Taylor's getting another year older. He's on the wrong side of where we want running backs to be at this point for where they should be maintaining value. And I don't think anything's happening in his situation to make it to where he has a better outlook than what happened last year. So for that, I'm going to go with Omarion Hampton, even though I do have issues with him as a prospect.
I promise I'm not going to pick the rookie every time. I don't know if I cut you off there, Tom, but
I was gonna, but you go.
I'll let you come in and you can make us both. You can call us both out at the end, but I'm going to take Hampton here. I think here, couple things here. First of all, I have become I've become increasingly confident that Omarion Hampton's going to be a first round pick in the draft. And if he's not a first round pick, he's going to be a very early second round pick. And that I feel confident in. And I've definitely seen people pick holes in his game a little bit. Dynasty Zoltan is a great analyst. He's a guy that I talk to a lot. He tweeted out today that he doesn't think Hampton is at all the RB2 in the class. He has him like 8th in his rankings based on film. So I'm not here to say that he's clearly head and shoulders the second best running back in the class, but what I do know is what happens when running backs get drafted early, especially ones that are big and fast and catch passes. And that is what Hampton is. I think we can get a little bit lost in the details and just maybe kind of miss the forest for the trees here, which is that if he gets drafted in the first round or even the early second round, he is going to be loaded up with touches. He is going to score plenty of fantasy points, since that is what drives like 90% of running back production. And he's probably going to gain value. Najee Harris has never been good in the NFL at any time. And he was a first round startup pick the year after he got drafted based on nothing but look how many touches the Steelers gave him. So I feel very confident in that bet. And Jonathan Taylor, maybe saying no upside is a little bit harsh for a guy going as early as he is. He's had one truly difference-making season in his career. It was year 2. Doesn't really get targets. He is fully reliant on, insane efficiency and volume and scoring touchdowns, and that's fine. It's just really hard for that player to really get you above like 18 points per game, at the high end. So at age 26, kind of a capped ceiling realistically outside of like scoring 20 touchdowns. I don't see Jonathan Taylor being all that different from like Josh Jacobs. So he doesn't excite me that much. I would rather take the swing on a guy I think has a lot more room to grow and gain from here.
You've all made wonderful points, and I love all of your points. You just remember, we're drafting for where the players are being taken in April. We believe, look, my biggest issue with this class is that the running backs, best assets in the draft. You know why that's scary is how not safe any of them are on any given. Do you remember when Javonte Williams was a 2-1 dynasty pick and how fast that went? Remember Breece Hall, who was so good, had so much insulation, got hurt, dropped to the 4th, went back up, and now he is a hot potato that nobody wants. The landscape for running back can change on a single play. So for me, when I'm looking at this in a sense of roster construction, and I am drafting, chances are I'm not taking Taylor there anyway. All right, let's be real. Me, running back, top 5 rounds, is never going to bloody well happen. Except for one time I took Achane, and I regretted it immediately.
You still have to pick, though.
You do still have to pick. There are other players in that range that I would be looking for, like trading up so I can get T. Higgins. Taking JJ McCarthy.
You didn't give me trade options. I had to pick between Hampton and Taylor. You have to do the same thing.
As the host of the show, Paul, I get to take the game, but I would just take JJ McCarthy. Like I would just.
Oh, I didn't know that was a choice.
I'm just saying. Well, the only reason I mentioned it is because you said
I'll just take JJ McCarthy in the first, guys.
I'm actually taking Justin Jefferson.
Listen. Paul was the one that introduced the opportunity by saying you still have to make the pick. Ergo, I made the switches. But let me break it down for you this way. It's fine to be chasing upside all the time, but again, if you don't really have to, look at the conversation that Debro laid out earlier in the program. Kaleb Johnson goes to, say, the Cowboys in round 2. He is arguably just as valuable, if not more valuable, than if Hampton goes somewhere that isn't the Broncos or isn't somewhere where we absolutely love the landing spot or isn't one of the 8 teams that use a bell cow. Maybe somebody loves Hampton so much they want to bolster their running back room. Hell, we know the Jets had conversations of adding Gibbs when they had Hall. Some of these running backs are going to get nerfed in this draft. Who is it going to be? I don't know. Look at Kaleb Johnson and where Kaleb Johnson is going right now. He's going RB20 in the 7th round. That's a more palatable click to me. than taking the gamble. Now I get it, Taylor.
Okay, Tom. Not to invoke your wrath here, but I can play the exact same game. Look at where Chuba Hubbard's going in the 7th round. I could make that bet rather than Jonathan Taylor, right? Like
I would love to.
We can arbitrage any of these guys.
I understand.
That's the thing. I feel like
you get it.
I feel like, yeah, I totally agree. It could go poorly, and that's why I said I'm not going to pick the rookie every time because I totally acknowledge that reality. For me, it's just a specific case of like I am confident enough in how this is going to go. In the same way that you can be confident in Jonathan Taylor and he could twist his ankle in week 1 and you could be right and wrong. Like if Hampton goes round 1, I don't care what team it is. Like I will stand by that choice.
That's fair. And if you believe, then you should. I am a believer that Taylor is an unreal football player and that in 14 games after getting his high ankle sprain and dealing with it, he was quite literally a league winner in an offense that is built around him. He's 26 in an age where running backs are going longer, used more, etc. I am going to take Taylor in a draft because that's what we're discussing here because I'm confident in my roster construction. And when I led this whole segment off of, I told you I told the listeners, think about roster construction when making these decisions. Because I think making positional to positional player bets is one of the worst bets that you can make in fantasy, period. If somebody approached me for a trade for the 102 in Taylor, I would have legitimate conversations about taking that 102 if it was Hampton. But we'll know that April 27th, not on April 1st. So if I'm building my roster now, I'm going to have the chance to make a trade, acquire, pick up other rookie running backs, stack them later. If I'm making this choice because I'm saying I need my running back now, which you should never do, I'm totally fine taking the 17, 18 points per game, legitimate league winning, championship winning upside player. The hard part is he's generally valued around the 104 and the 105. That's not the bet we're making here. But that's my thought process around it. If you want to pick Hampton, I have no issues with it. I'm just looking at it from in a different perspective than yourself and Lucas, in a team building manner. I would love to hammer that Jonathan Taylor because he is one of those workhorses. He is one of those game-breaking dudes. He is that dude. So I'm okay taking him there. I think you're right in terms of you could look at it from the Josh Jacobs side. You could look at it from the Chuba Hubbard side. I
think where we disagree is not. I don't think it's I think the philosophy you're saying here, I totally hear that. I think it's more that I have like a personal nitpick with Jonathan Taylor that you don't have, and that's all. Like, I guess it's where he had a great 3-game run in the fantasy playoffs last year, which was awesome. But like in general, the way that he produces fantasy points, like, just isn't the way that we typically see legendary seasons come about. Like he doesn't get enough of the pass. It really just comes down to he doesn't get enough targets to be a Christian McCaffrey, to be what we saw from Gibbs, what we saw from Bijan last year. I don't think he has that in the tank, and I don't know if he's giving me enough over running backs I can get later that I really care enough to invest highly in a running back that's not still gaining value, that isn't still in their early prime. That's really the nitpick. So I totally hear you as far as like, we haven't seen these guys drafted yet. It absolutely could go poorly for Hampton. We don't know what's going to happen. He could, post a video online of him smoking a bong like 20 minutes before the NFL draft. And then, before you know it, everything's different. I don't know if that still gets you in trouble in the year 2025 or not in the draft, but.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No disagreements from me here at all. Ryan?
So I'm gonna go Hampton here over Taylor, and I won't talk for a long time. I'll just say basically the reason is, yes, Hampton has immense value downside that could be realized on April 27th, which is scary, obviously, but Taylor has just as much value downside. Maybe not all of it will be realized on April 27th. Maybe only some of it will be when the Colts take a day 2 pass catching running back, and people react to that. Even though Taylor wasn't really that much in the pass catching role anyways, and there was no real RB2 in Indianapolis, but I think that is very likely. And yeah, just for all the reasons that have been talked about, Taylor is kind of at the age where running backs start to hit their value ceiling. I don't totally love his like fantasy scoring profile. So yeah, I'm kind of just looking at them, especially running backs that you're spending this much on, in terms of what there's a large chance that either falls off a cliff. You kind of pick your poison. I'll take the rookie where if I'm right, it's sick. Like he's round 1 to the Broncos. His value shoots up. We now have like the Najee Harris rookie season in our range of outcomes. Yeah, so I'm taking Hampton over Taylor. But let's move a little bit down the value board here and maybe get a slightly different conversation going. So one that really jumped out at me that I think will connect with some things we've mentioned earlier in the episode are Luther Burden at the wide receiver 25 right now over wide receivers like Terry McLaurin and Jordan Addison. So I'm going to give that to you first, Lucas. It's your reaction to Luther Burden over Terry McLaurin and or Jordan Addison.
Oh man. If you would have left it just as Jordan Addison, I think I would have gone with Luther Burden here. But I feel like with Terry McLaurin, I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin over Luther Burden here. And I'm really not a Luther Burden fan. I've been saying for a very long time that I have a lot of issues with his profile. Yes, he was great in his second year, but so much of that stuff was so manufactured. It wasn't really organic how he was producing. He has a lot of his holes in his profile in terms of trying to be a complete wide receiver. Yes, he is a freak athlete, and he has so much potential if he can put things together. He's electric whenever the ball gets in his hands. But there are so many unknowns right now. And also with Terry McLaurin, I feel like his situation is just really good right now. I'm just going to ignore Jordan Addison from this. Like he's fine, but I like the more sure production there. So yeah.
I just want to say, first of all, that I'm sorry, Tom, but Ryan skipped the one that I was going to take the veteran and not the rookie. So I'm going back to the rookie here.
You can say it if you want to get the take.
I will take, as of now, April 1st, 2025, I will take Kenneth Walker over Quinshon Judkins. I just want to put that on the record. I picked a veteran. I'm a big Kenneth Walker guy. But as far as Luther Burden versus Addison McLaurin, I actually have kind of the opposite feeling to Lucas, where it's pretty easily over McLaurin for me, and it's closer for Addison. So for McLaurin, I kind of have him tabbed as kind of one of my bigger sell candidates in Dynasty. You look at last year, just so much of it hinged on touchdown production. All of his other underlying metrics very similar to previous years. You look at the box scores as far as like receptions and yards. Basically the same guy he's been his entire career, but he scored touchdowns at the highest rate per reception of any wide receiver other than like Nick Westbrook-Akine last year. It was just ridiculous how often he was in the end zone. So guy going into his age 30 season, reliant on touchdowns just to kind of get up into the upper wide receiver 2 range, not even really wide receiver 1 points per game. So for me, that's kind of an easy call where I'm going to go with Burden, who I think, still has, if not early round 1, or if not late round 1 capital, early round 2 is likely kind of the area we saw Keon Coleman and Ladd McConkey go last year. There's enough with his profile for me, what he did in his sophomore season, where, I see the concerns, the red flag, the gadgety stuff. He's also got the highest ZAP score in JJ Zacharyason's model. And, he really likes what he's seeing from him from an analytical standpoint. So I'm kind of open to the wide range of outcomes with him. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier when you were talking about your 2 wide receivers. It's just, I'm not sure there's a lot of downside if I don't have a Jordan Addison or if I don't have a Terry McLaurin on my team. Whereas Luther Burden could come in and people don't like him right now. He could be the next Brian Thomas. He could be the next Ladd McConkey, or at the very least, he could be the next Xavier Worthy, who sort of some similarities as far as gadgety usage, early career production that kind of tailed off. He could come in and get a good landing spot and at least maintain value, from one year to the next. So I will take Burden in this choice.
I'm so indifferent on all these guys. I'll be mystery box guy here. I don't know. Both Addison and McLaurin are touchdown guys. I've had the same problem with Addison for a while. He 9 touchdowns and 10 touchdowns. That's kind of what he does. If he doesn't score, he's kind of ass. Great player, but kind of stuck in the wide receiver 2 cuck room. And one thing I don't want to be in is the wide receiver cuck chair. So I'll take Burden here. Ryan?
Oh man. I will also take Burden. Also for pretty similar logic to Paul. I don't love Burden as a prospect. I like the number stuff is great. He does definitely stuff the Excel sheets. I do get concerned when like the clips that we post on Twitter to show like, oh man, this prospect had a really horrible quarterback play. It's the clip where Burden is in the slot and just runs straight at the safety who doesn't move and runs straight by him. And because he doesn't get the ball there, that's somehow he has bad QB play. It's like, no, that's actually like every play that Luther Burden has. And that's how he got all of his production just against flat-footed safeties from the slot. So, and not to say that production can't be predictive. It definitely can over the aggregate. I'm not saying that all of Burden's production has to be fraudulent. Therefore, like you have to bury him. He is what he is. He's like a kind of interesting, like risky prospect. I'm still willing to do that on most teams in most situations over really just like the quintessential nesting doll wide receivers is what we're talking about with Terry McLaurin and Jordan Addison. Yep. So just give me the value upside in most circumstances.
I know we got to get out of here because Paul got to get out of here, but I got to say that play that you're describing, he didn't do shit. He ran in a straight line. The safety didn't move. It wasn't even a slot fade. He ran straight. It was like watching Tillman run past Marcus Williams or whoever the safety was that the Ravens cut when the Browns beat the Ravens. Don't give him credit. He ran in a straight line. He should have been mad. That quarterback absolutely buoyed him. Like it was brutal. Talk about cucking. That is cucking a touchdown if I've ever seen one. And for someone who said they didn't see a cuck reference coming on this show, I know you're new here. So if you want more of them, hit subscribe. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do quickly our rookie bargains and get Paul out of here to his loving family. Not me, though. I don't have one. Sit tight. The best part about being an orphan is having a lot of time on my hands to deal with fantasy football. I'm just lucky enough I have a wife that puts up with me. And part of that, Paul, is finding your favorite rookie values on the draft board. So I will lead off with you. Your favorite in terms of rookies being drafted right now. Who's the favorite rookie draft value?
That is a good question. First of all, that was an interesting segue to say that something about your marriage being successful is about identifying rookie bargains. That was very professional stuff there.
You need it
from you, Tom. Here's the tricky part about finding rookie values in startups right now is that, like we mentioned before, the rookies are going higher than the draft slots. You look at startups with draft picks included. You look at startups with rookies. The rookies are going higher than where the draft slots that they would be drafted in are going. And for the most part, a lot of the time they're being drafted too high, especially the further you get down the draft board where there is far more variance as far as where these guys can get drafted. You look at some of these running backs that have interesting profiles, but we know that when you get down past the top running backs, so much of what we can expect from them comes down to landing spot and draft capital, which we just don't have. I like Bashal Tutin. I like Cam Scatabo. I like DJ Giddens. I don't know when these players are getting drafted. I don't know where they're getting drafted. There's not nearly as much safety there as with someone like Hampton, where the range of outcomes is like, late first or early to mid second. Like that's not what the range of outcomes is with these guys. They could go in the 6th round. They could go in the 5th round, and then they're being absolutely buried. So all of that to say, I am stalling a bit while I find an answer to this question. But one guy that does strike me as interesting in the startup ADP over the last few weeks would be Jaxson Dart, going QB 27 in startup drafts. Did I just steal your guy? I hope I did.
Yeah.
He's getting, I think it was Mel Kiper said he's a lock to go in the 1st round, which obviously does not mean that he's a lock to go in the 1st round, but it is kind of the sentiment that's been going around that he's going to get drafted higher. And we heard this with Desmond Ridder. We heard this with Matt Corral. Like it might be totally false, but you look at where he's going, at least relative to quarterbacks, he's going 1 spot ahead of Anthony Richardson. I'd say Jaxson Dart is far more likely to be starting NFL games in week 15, 16, 17 next year than Anthony Richardson is. I think that's a totally fine place to take a shot. You're passing up on positional players like Cortland Sutton, maybe a Jaden Reed, a Jalen McMillian. These are not players that necessarily are going to have that super high upside for you. Whereas Dart, mobile quarterback prospect, potentially 1st round draft capital. I think that there's a decent bit to like there at that price, especially if you go into a startup and maybe you don't hammer the quarterback position early.
I'm so mad. If I had more stuff to throw around my desk, I'd do it. I waited an hour and 35 minutes for that take, and I didn't even get to have it. You're so fucking right. It's Richardson over Dart. Stop. Might as well be a clone trooper out there. I'm so sick of Anthony. I'm so sick of Anthony Richardson, dude. I can't. Enough. I can't. Daniel Jones in a legitimate competition. Just take Jaxson Dart. Oh my God. I don't have another one. I'm completely unprepared for this because Paul is just all ball knowing. So I'm out. So I'll leave it to Lucas and Ryan Heath.
All right. I can give a take here. And piggybacking a little bit off of what Paul was saying, where, when you're trying to identify a rookie value in early April, the obvious problem is, especially with this class and where the value is in it and where the talent is in it, a lot of this is very uncertain. Running backs, I do care about their landing spot. I do really care about their draft capital, right? So it's hard to call any of those guys' values. You want to look to wide receivers. That's not really the strength of this class. But I will tell you what the strength of this class is the tight ends, right? Tyler Warren, or really just Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland. I don't really care about any of the other guys, but I'm totally cool in a tight end premium with Tyler Warren as the tight end 4 in Dynasty right now. Seems totally reasonable to me. Very likely to go top 10, top 12-ish in the NFL draft. Has an insane resume of college production in his final season, was narrowly outproducing another NFL draft pick in Theo Johnson the season before. I'm pretty cool with Tyler Warren with that draft capital just being there. Very similar with Loveland at tight end 7 in startups right now. I think if you say, Ryan, like you have to click a rookie right now in a startup, one of those two is the one you're least likely to regret, is kind of how I would approach this.
Agreed. Lucas.
I just like so many of the rookies, and that's a real issue. I don't think at this point in time we can say that Kaleb Johnson is like a value just because of how absolutely crazy his draft capital is right now. I've seen him go anywhere between like 107 and 206. So if he's in the 2nd round in your leagues and you're doing a rookie draft before the NFL draft, I'm clicking on him as many times as possible, because without draft capital, he's the person outside the top 4, really, because I think both the Ohio State guys are now above him in terms of general consensus. Like I'm wanting Kaleb Johnson every single day of the week. Trying to look a little bit further down on the board, Trey Harris is someone who I think is slipping a little bit more as some of these wide receivers as some of these running backs start to climb, and everybody's like trying to make sure that they get a running back regardless of where their position is, just because it's an unknown right now. So I think that Trey Harris has a real potential to be somebody who sneaks through, especially depending on landing spot. Like if he doesn't land anywhere necessarily glamorous, I'm going to be clicking him every single time because he's going to be going at the 2.8. And I think that that's just something that's really easy value. He's going to have a very defined role whenever he gets into the NFL. I feel like he is an excellent field stretcher at the most elite level. He destroys any type of coverage that's out there. I have issues in terms of what his route tree is. I think he's also a little like stiff in the hips to be able to pull off some of these like shiftier type routes or be able to fit that kind of role. But I think what he does it at an absolute elite level. And I know that he's been kind of left for dead, but Orondre Gadsen, I think, is somebody who still paying attention to. I think he could take, a very similar to Isaiah Likely type path in the NFL, just because we kind of left him for dead after his Combine 2. And I think that the production is just so outrageous. And I know that what people will say about the ACC, I also know what people will say in terms of like just how he's generally used, but
round 22 startup pick, going between Kamani Vidal and Jawan Johnson. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you can pass up on those superstars to take the swing, but if you have the guts.
Yeah, I think like just that deep, he's somebody who I'm going to be walking away with in the 4th round every single time. He's somebody that I'm going to be immediately adding after rookie drafts whenever he's not drafted in 3-round rookie drafts. And we'll see. He'll probably eventually die on my taxi squad, but I'm willing to, make sure I'm making him a priority ad. I'll throw $3 worth of my fab towards him.
I will. Sorry, I just quickly want to cut in. That what Lucas just gave, that's like the real answer to this question, which is who are the players that you're going to get an edge on right now drafting before the NFL draft? It's like your pet favorite prospect that's probably going to go on day 3. But if he doesn't, the NFL draft industrial complex doesn't expect him to go earlier, doesn't expect him to go to an amazing landing spot. If he does, yeah, this is the best time you're going to get your value on, like, insert your pet 3rd or 4th round rookie pick. So that is the real answer, I think, to this question.
It's your time to get your Tyrone Tracy Juniors, like we were telling you last year, your Isaac Guarendos last year, where I got made fun of on draft night for liking them. So shout out to all the haters out there. Paul, you look like you got one more thing to say before I start wrapping things up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was looking at the ADP. I do think Jack Besh, who I know Jacob pointed out the other week, maybe a good candidate for this. He's 16th round startup pick going around Romeo Dobbs, Marquise Brown, Wan'Dale Robinson, multiple rounds after other wide receivers that are projected to go potentially 2nd or 3rd round in the NFL draft. So at least like relative to other rookies, definitely a lot less excitement for him as a prospect in startups 3-4 rounds after Alec Manor, Jaden Higgins, Isaiah Bond, all going way ahead of him. So I think if you wanted to take a shot on a rookie who could potentially get similar draft capital, maybe does have some interesting parts to his profile, that would be one guy to look at as well.
Now, also throw in real quick at the quarterback position. Sorry, Tom. Before the Senior Bowl, I think we've missed our window. Jalen Milroe was one of the most obvious people to be adding because he was going so late. But so depending on what you're looking at in terms of where he's going, he is kind of sneaking up there and he's getting really, really close to Jaxson Dart in some leagues. So that scares me a little bit. I think that there's going to be some times where it's going to be like, okay, that's too rich from my blood right now. But I definitely be paying attention to him. And then another late one would be Kyle McCord. Definitely am paying attention to where he's going. I think that he's probably a 3rd round quarterback. I think that somebody like the Pittsburgh Steelers potentially, even before a draft right now, that might be one of their emergency break glass type of plans, and he can sling it. I see what you're doing there, man. You all keep me up so late every single week. I have things to say this week, dadgummit.
It's
so
not
I'm
us
going to
keeping up, Lucas. It's Paul. It's not us. Me and Tom can be up as late as we need to. It's Paul that we're trying. It's the guest who doesn't do that to you that we're trying to be considerate of here.
Look. I'll give you all next week to talk about Kyle fucking McCord. Okay, but it is not this day. My
Tom,
Lord.
do your outro. Tom, do your outro.
Get out of here.
We don't have a
did
Will
Lucas
Howard
show
segment.
up? When did AJ
Quinn
Hawk-
Ewers, anybody? I don't know. What do we do?
No, no, we're not going. Absolutely not. The one time Lucas shows up and AJ Hawk leaves, it's at the end when we need to get Paul out of here. What is happening? I want to point out that we only had 3 comments that I chose for Data Suites. I do have the other one. Big Diaz Energy. Treat these rookies like interns. Don't learn their names till they get a job. I like that one. And I'm going to give it up to a Wookiee Monster, partly because of the name. And also, he was encouraging me to let my rant out. And we love that. If you won a subscription, you can all my social handles are the same. L Nostra Thomas. That's on the screen. DM me on Discord. DM me on Twitter. Get a hold of me, please. If not, those subs are just going to go to however Paul sees fit in distributing them in the Pure Potential Discord. Be on the lookout because we're doing giveaways like this quite often. With that being said, Paul, you're always a pleasure to talk to argue with, to have on. You are a ball knower. I feel like a proud dad every time I see your channel. And when I look and there's at least what I assume would be a proud dad, as I didn't have one. So every time I see your channel grow more and more and as fast as it is, I feel proud. So would you let the Fantasy Point subscribers know what Pure Potential is up to next?
Yeah, I appreciate you, Tom. I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to come and chat with you guys. You know, all of you guys, anytime. Always happy to come back. But yeah, Pure Potential, working on it's Dynasty all the time, all year round. New video at least every week. Do live streams as well. It's all been rookie focused lately. Did a rookie mock draft last week with landing spots. We're gonna do next video up this week is going to be trading second and third, those kind of late round picks. Who are some players to target? You know, going to take some of the conversations from today and really think about where can we identify upside, where are some profiles that we can actually swing on where it's worthwhile. But that's what we're working on. And then, you know, we get the NFL draft. It's going to be updated rankings. Who are we targeting? Who are we fading? How do we exploit the rookie draft ADP to help you win your dynasty rookie drafts? So that's the next, month and a half.
We love that, man. I'm constantly checking in on the Pure Potential channel. It's dope as hell, man. You've built a phenomenal community. Every once in a while, I poke my head into the chat, spew some bullshit, and dip again. It's always a phenomenal time in there. A lot of smart ball knowers.
Oh yeah.
Shot. I mean, I'll take it. No earthly father.
Oh man.
I've been had. That is the best comment of the evening, and we're going to end it on that. Sean, you are an absolute goat and an absolute pleasure. Just like all of you. Remember, there is no show without all of you, but it is also that time of the show where I have to remind everybody that we have fun here, and you should too. We make jokes. We probably don't watch enough film. It's important to keep that in mind, okay? Because remember, Dynasty is a fun game. It's supposed to be fun. There's people on the other side of the screens when you're yelling and arguing and calling names, etc. Remember, there's a human side to this. It's always unpredictable. Like Paul said in one of his videos alone, it is really hard to get 11 other managers to agree with you on any decisions, let alone trying to predict their next move. So stay fluid, stay locked in. Ryan Heath has a ton of stuff going on. Lucas, I'm sure, will be back being the war master himself as soon as his house gets figured out. Remember to hit the like and subscribe. I know we didn't answer the questions. I'm super sorry. This was almost 2 hours long, and I wasn't expecting because Jacob wasn't here. But guess what? Paul did a phenomenal job filling in for Jacob, so shout out to you. I just want to remind everyone to like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps if you're listening to this on Spotify. You get the whole episode this time. Leave a comment. It drives us up the charts on Spotify as well. It doesn't matter what you say. Tell me my hat looks stupid. I don't care if you didn't even watch it or not. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose. And remember that your best days, oh my, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.